Have you ever wondered what your reason for being is, what your true reason for being is? Well, I have throughout most of my life. It's been a predominant issue for me throughout most of my life. Hi, I'm Dr. Dave, and welcome to the Good Life Lab, where we experiment with and explore tools, tips, and techniques for boosting our mental health and just having a better, happier life. I'm a therapist, college professor, and coach, and also a positive psychology researcher, which basically means I study the science of happiness. And I try not to just study it, but also live it and experiment with this evidence-based science of happiness. And today we're in this 3-part series within a 4-week series. So this second part of this 3-week part series is about purpose and how purpose can help you boost your mood. So today, the first part of this week, I talked about how projects create a sense of purpose for me and with the clients I work with. And today's going to be more about this concept called Ikigai, which means reason for being. It's a Japanese concept that has become more popular through this National Geographic study that was done by Daniel Buettner a few years ago. He wrote a book called Blue Zones. And in that research, he went looking for regions in the world where people lived the longest and found 5 blue zones, he called them. And one of those blue zones was Okinawa, Japan. And one of the reasons for people living long lives there was this concept called Ikigai, which is basically they kind of woke up with a sense of clarity around their purpose and their reason for being for the day. And so that's been adapted over the years, and there's been a Venn diagram associated with that concept. I'm going to walk you through my adaptation of this Ikigai process and how it could be a guide for career guys who want to find greater purpose, greater meaning, and greater happiness. My clients and for myself, I've created these projects around this concept. So I'm going to walk you through step by step what I have done with clients and students and for myself, and hopefully it will be an interesting process for you to go through as well for yourself. So I've also created a case study around this, which is a combination of my clients and details around my own life. So it's not just one person, it's a number of cases that I've combined into one that are kind of representative of what I've dealt with myself, but also with people I work with. So this first step in this process of discovering your Ikigai is to look at what you love, what you're deeply passionate about. And oftentimes I use this tool called a life list, which is essentially just listing a number of dreams and goals and brainstorms that you have about your life, things that you really want to do. It could be travel goals, could be personal goals, just wild and crazy dreams that you have, very similar to a bucket list, but things that you want to accomplish within your life. So the second quadrant that is important to look at for discovering your Ikigai is what you're good at. What are your strengths? And the tool I use often with people is called a VIA inventory. And I'll share with you in the case study some more specific directions for how to do that. So looking at your strengths is the second quadrant. The third circle, part of the Venn diagram, is what your needs are and what the needs of the world might be. So I do this a little differently. I think the original Ikigai diagram has this as what are the needs of the world that you can meet. And for me, it's more looking at what are your needs? What are your well-being needs right now that might also relate to what the world needs? And a tool I use for this is produced by the Greater Good Berkeley website. And they have a section on there called Keys to Wellbeing, which is full of research around well-being, how to practice it, why practice these different keys to well-being. So we'll get into this more detail here in a minute. And if you can kind of come up with something that looks at what you love, what you're good at, and also what your needs are, and look at something that's kind of overlapping or intersecting there at the middle, it's your Ikigai or reason for being, or a project around these 3 areas that could create a sense of reason for being. So we'll look at that in Conrad's case study. So I've called this fictional case character Conrad, and he has a quest for Ikigai or reason for being, and he wants to boost his mood. So these are the steps I might take him through to help him figure that out. So Conrad is 29 and kind of at a crossroads in his life. He's searching for vocational direction and life purpose. He's also navigating relationships and coming to terms with his sexual identity. So very common case in the clients and people I work with. So in this first category or area of Ikigai, in terms of what he loves and what he's deeply passionate about, I often have people list at least 25 items on a life list. And but for this scenario, I'm just going to list the top 6 that represent what Conrad was thinking about. But I've also written an article about this, so you can look at that as well. I'll put that in the description below. So in terms of his top 6 passions or things that he really wants to pursue as part of his life list, he wants to practice walking meditations daily, understand his sexuality and coming out, host monthly small group meetings, create a vision journal, and write a blog post monthly, and document personal growth journey. So those are a few highlights of the things that he really wants to do as part of his life list. The second area of the Ikigai diagram is what you're good at, what your strengths are. And as I said, I use a VIA inventory in the slideshow, but the results give you 24 items or strengths that you can use or utilize in some way. And I've found that, and research shows that if you can identify and lean into your top strengths consistently, it not only helps you succeed in what you're trying to do, but also it makes you happier in that process. So leaning into and practicing your strengths can make you happier and more successful. So that's why I incorporate this as part of the Ikigai process. And in terms of Conrad's top 5 strengths, they are creativity, appreciation of beauty, love of learning, honesty, and curiosity. These actually are mine. So I use my strengths report as an example. And I usually ask clients to select 1 or 2 or 3 of their top strengths to utilize in some way in their project, in their Ikigai project. And so I've highlighted creativity, love of learning, and curiosity, things that Conrad would want to use in his Ikigai project. The third quadrant has to do with what you and the world need. So what are your needs in terms of well-being? And again, I use Greater Good Berkeley website to help with that. They have these keys to well-being that they've done a lot of research on. So in looking at it, Conrad came up with these 2 keys that he wanted to focus on: purpose and mindfulness. I'll show you some details about what you'll see on the Greater Good website in the selection of keys to well-being here. There are several. There's gratitude, purpose, mindfulness, kindness, a number of things. I usually ask clients to just pick 1 or 2 keys to well-being that they can focus on as part of the project, again, to bring a sense of boosting your mood and your well-being as a part of this process. So Conrad's identifying 2, purpose and mindfulness, as keys that he can incorporate and integrate into his Ikigai project. So this all comes together in Conrad's project, his Ikigai project. He's identified 3 areas that he wants to focus on: research and writing. He wants to research and write a weekly blog that captures his thoughts about sexual identity, vocational calling, and sense of meaning and purpose. He'll research resources that can help him navigate this next phase of his life and put reflections and key lessons into a blog that represents his journey. So oftentimes in my work with people, they come up with these creative activities they want to do in a way to reinforce what they're learning. And so for him, for Conrad, it's research and write a weekly blog. The second area that he wants to work on is to walk and reflect peacefully and mindfully each day and focus on key health, well-being, and mental health practices. When possible, he wants to also ask others to walk and meditate with him to strengthen his connections with others in a meaningful way. And this third intention that he has as part of this project is to connect and come out to key family members and friends. So he's balancing his strength of curiosity about their lives, so talk with his family and friends to not only share his life, but also ask them to share their stories as well by being vulnerable and honest with them. He would also like to form a small group of guys to reinforce this practice of vulnerability and talking about sexual identity as one of his goals was to come out and become more comfortable with that. These are the 3 areas he wants to include as part of his Ikigai project as a result of looking at what he's good at, what he's passionate about, and what his needs are. Those 3 quadrants form these 3 key intentions for his project. And I encourage people to think about this in terms of a month-long project or even 6 months or a year-long project. That's even better because it takes at least 30 days to begin to develop a habit, but it's taken up to a year, even 2 years, to really solidify and integrate those concepts that I want to learn into who I am. So it takes some time, and I encourage you to at least try 30 days, but then as a pilot, but then continue it on for longer after that if you've decided to follow this Ikigai process. So I believe I mentioned in the introduction that I've used this process for myself, but also with my clients and my students, and it's something that's been very helpful to me. I actually turned it into a research study. So it's been a pilot study I've done. I've done it with 50 people in small groups of 6 or 7. And I asked them to do pre-tests and post-tests on happiness levels. I took them through this process, very similar to what I just shared with you. But they also created a month-long project that they had to do. And so after that 7 weeks, it turned out to be, they reported significant increases in feeling connected to other people, feeling more meaning in their life, greater health and happiness, and also a greater sense of life satisfaction. So there were significant changes over 7 weeks that they were able to sustain. Interestingly, though, after I've stayed in touch with a number of these people after those 7 weeks, and now a year, 2 years later, those changes, initial changes and boosts, have sometimes continued, but more often not, because they don't continue to practice what their initial project was. So my encouragement is that I've done these 7-week projects, but I've also done these year-long projects with people, and definitely these year-long projects have much more sticking power if you can commit to those longer-term projects. So I'll share with you some of the research results I've found in this study that I did in the description below to give you some more evidence for what this is about. I'll also share with you how to create a life list, and this article I've written about Conrad as a case study, and then also more details about this process. This is a really simplified process that I've done. There are many more components to this full-length process that I've created called the Good Life Positioning System. So you can look for more details about that as well in the description below. I also have a number of digital products to consider, and a wait list that I'm putting together for a group coaching experience and community that will get at some of these ideas of boosting your mood and also finding purpose and having greater well-being and meaning in your life. So if you'd like to learn more about that wait list for a coaching group and community, please look at the description below and sign up for that. I'd love to give you more information as we get people's interest and develop a waiting list. So thanks for joining me. Next time, as part of this 3-part series on purpose, we'll look at how to create a mission and purpose statement, and using myself as an example of how I did that. So look for that next time. And thanks for joining me, and have a great rest of your week.